Hi everyone, this is Dr. Marco and welcome to this week's health tip. This time we're going to be talking about vertigo, dizziness, and balance issues. So there's a lot of different reasons why people might feel dizzy or have balance problems, but this is just one thing that's sort of a fairly common thing that a lot of people don't know about and they don't know why it happens. But there's this, vertigo is this kind of sensation. Sometimes we call it subjective vertigo, where I feel like I'm spinning, or objective, meaning you feel like the room is spinning around me, or you feel unstable, balance problems, these kind of things. There's something called BPPV, which is benign positional paroxysmal vertigo. Big, long, complicated thing that means just sometimes people, they're not necessarily doing anything. They might bend over, come back up, and then all of a sudden the room is spinning and they're dizzy and they got nausea and they can't really balance themselves anymore. Sometimes it just happens spontaneously. They're not even necessarily doing anything and this happens, but sometimes there's just a movement that they do and all of a sudden they're a mess for weeks sometimes. Happened to a relative of mine. He was swimming with his daughter in the swimming pool, and when he was young he used to get to the end of the pool, they do that little flip that the Olympians do to turn around and go back. Well, he did that, and while he was underwater it just started going crazy. He didn't know where he was. He said, I just had to look for the lights to know how to come back up to surface to the pool, basically, to get out. And so he emailed me. He wasn't near me at the time, and he was mentioning some of his symptoms and things like that, the dizziness, nausea, vertigo, couldn't balance, difficulty sleeping, all sorts of things. I sent him my video that I made last week on the wanderer, meaning the vagus nerve, and I gave him some information on what he should do at home to kind of stimulate the vagus nerve coming out of the brain to kind of settle down the intestines, and that helped a little bit, but I knew I had to do this positioning maneuver. So when people have this problem, when people have a dizziness or vertigo or balance problems of any kind, usually there's one problem with three systems in your body that tell your brain where you are. So these three systems are your visual system. That's the biggest input to your brain, is stuff coming into your eyes. So you can see the horizon, you know where you are, where you're walking. The second system is the canal system in your ears. So there's three little canals that are filled with fluid that are inside your ears, inside the bones in here. And when you move, there's a little fluid that has these little rocks in them. We call them otoliths, and they kind of move around when you move. And they stimulate little cells inside those canals that tell your brain how you're moving your head, your acceleration, deceleration, and these kind of things, so you know where you are. And then the last system, which is the most overlooked system, is the proprioceptive system, meaning the joints in your spine, mainly the ones in your neck. Those are ones that are just jam-packed full of these little, what we call proprioceptors, that they send signals to your brain to tell you where your head is oriented in space. And so all three of those systems need to jive. They all need to be sending the same signal to the brain for you to feel stable. So for example, if you're walking, if you think about how much of your brain does so much interesting stuff. So when you walk, you're actually moving up and down, you're kind of gyrating and all this stuff. You have to have these little muscles. You have all these muscles around your eyes. They all have to be super coordinated to keep your eyes steady while your head's doing all this funky stuff. If people have weaknesses in certain parts of their brain due to lack of stimulation from the spine, or a stroke, or blood flow problems, these kind of things, certain areas in the brainstem or certain parts of the brain that control the nerves that control your eyes, if they get weak, all of a sudden one eye goes off, and all of a sudden you're not getting the right signals into your brain, and whoa, you're not stabilizing your eyes when you're walking, and that's a big problem. So that's one thing that can do it. So this benign paroxysmal thing, benign meaning it just happens, it's sort of like a random event sort of thing, but it's not like a big chronic disease or anything like that. But what happens is those canals in your ear, one of those little rocks that are in those three canals, one of them can kind of break loose, and it starts randomly moving on its own through the canals. And when it does that, it's actually, those canals are sending a signal to your brain that you're moving your head when you're actually not. And so that erroneous signal going in can cause massive dizziness issues, nausea, all the things that go along with this vertigo problem. So there's a solution for that. You can actually look it up, or usually you can come to a practitioner like us, and there's a specific repositioning maneuver that we do, and there's a couple of different ones. Your head's back, and you're leaning, we're turning it, we're looking at your eyes, seeing when they stop, and we turn it the other way, and we flip you around on the table and do this little maneuver. So there's a special maneuver that we know how to do when people have this kind of problems that can be helpful. But the other big key when people have vertigo or balance issues is this one. The one that gets overlooked almost all the time is the input coming in from the spine. So like I said, the first two vertebrae, the muscles just on them, we call them the suboccipital muscles. Okay, so this is your spine. We're looking at it this way. So here's your head up here. This is your skull. This is the first vertebrae in the spine, and this is the second one here. These little muscles right here, going from the first and the second vertebrae, we call them the suboccipital muscles. Those muscles are jam-packed with these little receptors because they're so important. Because let's say you're falling, that's people. They're lift up their head because they won't only smash your head against the ground. They're kind of there, so dense in that way to protect your head from damage. And you know, if you're falling you're about to hit something, or if you do hit something, you react very quickly because those little receptors send a signal to your brain to try to prevent brain damage as much as you can if you're falling or you're about to hit your head on something. But the other thing is, just in general, they're sending constant signals to your brain of where your head is in space. Now, as you know, in chiropractic, we're always dealing with these things called subluxation. So if the vertebrae gets twisted out of position, that can actually cause erroneous contraction in these muscles, and they can be sending constantly bad signals thinking that your head is always turned to the side when it's not. And that can even cause posturing. People's heads can get tilted. That might even be like a cause of certain scoliosis in the spine, because if it's so tight on one side, it's pulling the head like this. The brain doesn't want the horizon to be crooked, so it'll actually push the spine out of alignment to make the head straight. So some people may even have a scoliosis because they've had a trauma up here. And very often, you've heard me mention this so many times, that the trauma up here can very often come from the birth process. Doctors pulling on the head to pull it out during a C-section, forceps deliveries, vacuum extractions. The doctor's hands is stronger on one side than the other. They can force it out and cause this disturbance, and that can even happen right from birth. But you know, people through the course of life, they get in a car accident or something, and there's a heavy whiplash, and if they're looking in the rearview mirror when that happens, it goes off in a funny direction. Then all of a sudden, one side is always contracting, sending bad stimulation, and that's why they get headaches, dizziness, all these kind of things after car accidents, or sports injuries, or concussions, or whatever it is. So other than the positioning maneuver that we can do, if that's one of these benign situations, if it's sort of like a general sort of constant headache or constant sort of dizziness and feeling unsettled and unbalanced, having these checked is one of the biggest things you can do. So that's why there's some people that actually go specifically to chiropractors that are specializing just working on those first two vertebrae, because they actually are that important. So in the care that we do, obviously we do a lot of work up here too, on the top and the bottom of the spine, to make sure that's working as good as possible. And that's one big way that we can help people that have dizziness issues and balance problems and those kind of things. So that's your health tip for this week. If you want to get checked, if you have any of these issues and you need to get them dealt with, make sure you go check out your chiropractor. If you're in the Markham area, come and check us out. Our information is down below. That's your health tip for this week. If it was helpful, please share it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.